Hello, it's Peter Merrick, a Canadian living in San Diego. And today we are going to be sharing a story of San Diego, unique to San Diego, told by a major personality of San Diego, Neil Senturia. Neil is a transplant to San Diego. He's left his mark on San Diego. Neil was first a writer for MASH, one of the greatest comedies of all time. He made a transition and moved to San Diego and became a builder, kick-starting the regentrification of the downtown area, building over 2 million square feet in the downtown. From there, he got active in startups, tech, biological companies, and from there he became a VC. Neil is going to be sharing with us the story of Gina Champion-Cain, who ran the largest Ponzi scheme committed by a woman. And Neil tells his story with his wife, Barbara Bree, who is also a personality, a politician in San Diego. And it's a story of redemption, and the story has not yet been told. Let's go enjoy Neil, and you're going to love him as much as I do. Some time ago, I just recently transplanted, but we met 3 years ago. We connected, and one thing I realized immediately, not only is Neil a great entrepreneur, a builder, a VC, a writer, he's also one of the great storytellers. One of the times that when we sat down, the first thing Neil said to me is, let me tell you a story. And every story has a point. And you leave knowing the point because you have a reference to a powerful story. And today we're going to be talking about Neil's latest book, I Did It, a story about Gina Champion-Cain. Sorry, Cain. Cain. Gina.
Well, Gina's a con and a Cain. That's fair. We wrote the book, we being my wife, Barbara Bree, and myself. And it's an interesting story. It's kind of unique in that this woman ran the largest woman-run Ponzi scheme in American history, totaling $400 million. And we had met her. I'll give you a quick, should I give you a little background?
Please.
She was famous in this town. A developer, a woman in a man's world. She had hit the glass ceiling a couple of times. She had shattered it once or twice. She was really quite an interesting and unique individual. She even had a day named after her called Gina Champion-Cain Day in San Diego. So here's what happens. In the fall of 2019, the SEC served her with a complaint for wire fraud, and it makes the paper. They're claiming that she was running a Ponzi scheme. And we, my wife and I, maybe a month, 2-3 weeks later, I said to her, this is a great story. And I send her an email. I mean, I know her. We had met her socially. She'd been to the house a couple of times when my wife was raising money for running for the city council. And I just tell her, look, it must have been a difficult time and we wish you well. That's the end of it. Then we get to the winter, February of 20, and she writes to me, I just read one of your most recent columns in the newspaper. I write a weekly column in the San Diego Union Tribune. She says, I thought it was wonderful. So that prompted me to reach out again. And by now it's quite a story. And over the next few months, she comes to the office 2 or 3 times, and I never ask her what she did or how she did it. I'm mostly auditioning for her because I think it's a story. Anyway, at the end of the day, Come the summer of 20, she says 3 or 4 people had offered to write the book. She picked us, and Barbara and I proceeded to write the book. And we wrote the book in an interesting way, in that normally these kind of books tend to be journalistic. They tend to be the writer pieces together all the stuff and tells the story, but almost never does the participant tell the story. It's always the journalist has to piece it together. But Gina came to us and said, I'll tell you the story. So this is her view of the story. So the book is called I Did It, and it's Gina Champion-Cain, as told to Neil Senturia and Barbara Brie. And so it's kind of interesting because if you look at all these, there's HBO and Max and Apple, and there's no shortage of cons and crimes on streaming, but they're mostly documentary. They're mostly done as, you know, a stand-in. They'll record what did happen, but they never get the person themselves. And in this case, Gina told her story. And what's interesting about the story from my point of view is this. Everybody knew and nobody said nothing. This scam ran for 7.5 years. It was a phony liquor license lending program. But the number of times that red flags came up and people found mistakes, they just looked the other way. It was never found until the very end. A particular, and in the books, is a story about the whistleblower. But what's interesting to me is it's sort of like this. You go to the ball game and you have a hot dog. Now, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I went to film school. And one of the first films I made was in a meatpacking plant of how to make sausage. And I'll tell you, of course, this is nothing unique. You go to the ball game, you eat the hot dog. If you knew how hot dogs were made, even Manischewitz, even kosher hot dogs, if you knew how they were made, you wouldn't eat hot dogs. So the business of getting money at 10, 12, 13% when the rest of the world's at 1, 2, 3, it's a little bit like, I like getting money. I just don't want to know. I don't want to know. You guy shows up with a new Lamborghini. I don't want to know. It's nice. I get to drive it. So that's sort of the subtext of the book, is that the number of enablers, the number of bundlers, the number of people who participated, received money, it was quite extensive. And it's the only Ponzi scheme in American history where the investors will get back 97% of their money. Normally you lose everything, but this scheme had enough deep-pocketed, I would use the word participants. Some people might say crooks, but let's just use the word participants, so that such that 97 cents on every dollar has been returned or is being returned to the investors.
Yes. So it's really interesting. I was thinking about Gina's name. Gina in Greek means queen. Champion is like winner. And then Cain, Abel and Cain. Just like the queen champion of Cain or fallen. Right. And I think about it that maybe people should have actually started parsing her name before they got involved with her.
It's interesting. One of the things that's hard for people, and it was, I think it haunted her, is that you have a persona. You're perceived as we'll use the word a big shot. Yeah. But the reality, when it doesn't match the perception, people behave in ways to support how they're perceived. If you're perceived a certain way, then you don't want to tell the truth. You don't. So the truth is, she wasn't that good at the real estate business. She was an image that was not fully supported by her reality, somewhat, just enough. And people behave in ways to bolster, I don't want people to know that I have the imposter syndrome, that I'm really not successful. You say he's a famous entrepreneur and blah, 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 and he's got fingerprints. My fingerprints, if they're on the FBI file, I don't want those fingerprints. So my point being, that we humans want to support how we would like to be seen. And when people see us that way, we want to, it's nice to be seen that way. And then we act in a way to support that. Sometimes we act illegally, badly, and we lie to support the image because we don't want to give that up.
So Neil, so what you're saying is, and I just want to repeat it back to you, ego kills. Because if we have an ego and we believe it, we try to support it, we can do things that are very detrimental to ourselves and to other people. What I'm also hearing about the cornerstone of your story is she bought into the reality, and she did everything, tried to juggle the balls until the balls fell.
Yeah, there's actually, it's an interesting comment about the balls. She had a restaurant. Here's a sort of a core story. She has a restaurant, she starts, it's wildly successful. And in the course of opening the restaurant, she gets a liquor license. You have to get that for the restaurant. And she does, a couple of people come to her, a couple of people come and borrow hard money. You lend money at 12, 13%, and people invested and they got paid back. So the irony is the first 3, 4, 5 liquor licenses were legitimate. So she sort of says, and then she has a problem. The restaurant opens and they're $600,000 short. The front of the restaurant is fabulous. People are drinking martinis. There's music, there's action. And in the back, the bathroom is not completed and one of the walls is missing. In other words, yes, there's like the Wizard of Oz. So I need $600,000 to finish the tenant improvements. And she says, well, I'll gin up some liquor licenses. This is an interesting problem, but I know I can pay that back. So you get a little bit pregnant. You sort of say, well, I'll take 600,000 and, but I can refinance. I can pay it back. I know what I'm doing. I'm not stupid, but it's just, I just need a little bit of extra to finish the restaurant. And then what happens, of course, is, well, this is pretty good. I'd like to buy another vacation rental. And it's a little bit like this. So I'm a skier and I'm a pretty good skier, but I'm not a great skier. So if you start down a double black diamond, you look, guys, I can do that. You start down about 100 yards and there's a cliff and you stop and you say, I cannot get down this. But you know what else happens? You can't get back up. That's the problem. When you've started down that ski run and it's not just double black, it's like a quadruple black, and you want to turn around. I want out. I want to get back up. You can't climb back up out of that snow. And that is the problem many of us face. You get a little bit, you turn the corner. It's just, you go to the bar, you have 4 drinks. The guy says you should take an Uber home. No, it's okay. I can get home. You smash into somebody, you kill somebody, and your life is irrevocably changed for one stupid behavior. That's what happened.
So this can happen. So her story, Gina's story, is a story that can happen to any of us. But we're there. Now, years ago, I spoke with a lawyer, and he shared something about people get into partnerships. And a gentleman, his wife was really unhappy that this gentleman got into a partnership. And the lawyer said something brilliant to him. He said, the time to decide is before you go into partnership. It's easy to walk away, but it's very difficult once you start going down the ski hill. Things start happening, you're in it. So now that she's out of it, did she spend time?
Well, she got sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She is currently in Dublin FCI, which is Federal Correctional Institution. It's in right outside Oakland. It's called the Dublin FCI. But the story isn't done yet. So she got sentenced because the loss was ostensibly $184 million. But it turns out the loss is going to be $2 or $3 million. So then there's the problem of restitution, and maybe the sentence gets changed, and maybe there's other people. One of the problems, you write a book, is you have to stop. This is a
Yes.
book, and we finished it at this point in time, but there's more coming. So we'll see. I would lay, I'd bet $100 to a dime that she doesn't do 15 years. No, this story's not over, because there are more bodies being uncovered. There's people who were involved, and it just isn't done yet.
When you say enablers, explain that to me, what you mean by that, because that's really interesting. Because
I'll make it easy for you. There were 370 investors in this scheme, 370 investors. She knew personally maybe 60, 65, 20%. That's not, I mean, she didn't have 370 friends. She knew 60 people when she started, and then people started partnerships, and people would send money to Chicago Title. It says the Gina deal. There's no paperwork. The money simply arrived in the strangest ways. There were bundlers and enablers who went and raised money from other people to put into this deal that she'd never met. So that's kind of interesting, because normally in a Ponzi scheme, you have some relationship to the people. It's sort of, I know this person and they were in the church or they were this. In this case, 75% of the investors she'd never heard of. There are people who sued her that she'd never heard of. They'd never been in the deal. It was astounding. It was like this moment where they thought people were handing out free money. Now, you and I both know that if the money is supposed to be free, it's not free. There's no such thing as free money. So we look the other way. We say, I don't know. We just don't want to know. People don't want to know.
And I think we've seen that in society as well. We trust our doctors, we trust our politicians, we trust all these different professionals. We're always trusting that someone else is going to dot the I's. And I think what's happened, especially for a big percentage of society, is a lot of people are saying, well, no, I should read the fine print and make sure and do my investigation.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the fine print is pretty hard to read. You know, I just came from the dermatologist to see if I had any skin things. You know, and you sign something that essentially says, you have no rights. Good luck. Hang on. We'll do the best we can. I never read it. I mean, nobody reads. I mean, this is classic. Go back to the mortgage scams. I mean, people sign stuff all the time. Now, here's what's really interesting. There's 4 or 5 of these bundlers who signed personal guarantees to the banks, and they owe the money, and, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, there's no question why. The reason the book is called I Did It is, to Gina's credit, there is no revisionist history. I did it. I knew what I did. Matter of fact, the first thing she says to me at the very first time we ever talked, she says, I know Ponzi schemes can never work. This is not a stupid woman. This woman went to the University of Michigan. She went to law school. This is a smart woman. She got an MBA from USD. So I know that Ponzi schemes can never work, comma, but. And that's how people get caught. That's the story.
What's the hole that she left in San Diego? Because you were sharing with me that she was quite the personality.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the hole has been filled up, meaning it's the story. The story's a good one. She's in prison. There's still more shoes to drop. But the larger story is, at the time that she did this, it was very difficult to be a woman real estate developer. There were only 2 in this town, and she was one of them. And the other one wasn't really a developer, was more like an investor. So the famous glass ceiling, the can I succeed in a man's world? Because the real estate development business in 2007, 8, 9, 10, that's a man's business. Nobody's women. So she was a fierce competitor, and she wanted to make it as a woman in a business that did not take kindly to women doing this, didn't support them. And so there was a certain amount of anger. I don't think that justifies criminal behavior.
Right.
But there are lots of women who have stories that are similar, at least in terms of being denied and defeated and marginalized. Not all of them, of course, turn to crime, but those feelings of being wronged, I think that those are, if not universal, they are widespread among smart, powerful women attempting to carve out their own careers.
So does her family still live in San Diego? She had a husband named Steve.
Her husband is a very interesting and charming guy. We've actually become friendly, and tonight we're having dinner. So here's the one question everybody wants to ask the husband. Did you know? I've talked to him extensively. The answer is no. Absolutely, he did not know. And that's the part of the sausage story, which is, well, she says to him, you know, we're getting this vacation rental, or we're going to go this, or I'm buying a car. He assumes that the real estate business she's doing is fine and never asks. And I don't fault him for that. I mean, I don't fault him, but for sure he was not in on it. You know, one of the stories are always abounding that he's got money in Mexico where he works. They had one of the bundlers has an offshore account in Switzerland. I mean, it's crazy stuff. But I think you can be married and not know. I mean, why do you think people have affairs? And then after a certain amount of time, you come home at 2 a.m. or the phone rings, or it's a text message from a phone you're not, and people, I didn't know. People do it all the time. So I'm not sympathetic per se to Steve, but I like him. And I think I'm empathic, meaning his life was turned upside down. Here's a guy that's 60, he's 54 years old, 54, I think, 55. And all of a sudden his wife's in jail, and the lawyers want to claw back money. And what happened to the life? They've been married 30 years. This is not, this is not the 6th marriage. This is one marriage. So you have to have some sympathy, some feelings, some compassion for the husband. Like, whoa, that was not our deal. I didn't marry a criminal. That was not the deal we made. And people change the deal in relationships and business all the time.
And how about her children? Are they in San Diego, or are they gone?
They didn't have any children.
No children.
No children.
Okay.
She had a hysterectomy, I think, when they were younger. But it wasn't in the cards. I don't think they really wanted children. I don't know. I think Gina simply said it wasn't on their to-do list.
Right. The reason I'm asking these questions is because one of the reasons a lot of people stay straight, because they have this responsibility for legacy. Their children. Like, I don't want my children to suffer, my grandchildren to suffer. And I can just share with you from my planning days when I was doing financial planning in the early 1990s. My best clients were ones who had children, who were married, because they had an investment into the future. And the ones who did not have an investment into the future, they lived for now. And that is just something that I've discovered in my days. And in essence, that's why traditionally they would like to find someone who they were hiring who was married, who had children, because they felt that that was a grounding for them to be more honest. I can't speak for women, but most men don't grow up until they have children and they become responsible for another life.
I think that's well said, and I believe that.
These are just things that they're antidotes. I can't prove it. I also know something else too. Usually if someone's going to commit a crime, so there's 2 things I look at. Do they have any responsibility to other people, especially those that they love, younger ones? The other thing is when people get older, it is a statistical fact that if they are going to commit a crime, it's most likely at the end of their lives, because they're not thinking about 20, 30 years in the future. They're saying, I only have like a few years left, so what's the big deal? And these are just the things that I've discovered. But one of the things I want to focus on now, specifically of your book and yourself, she's add color to a city. Right now, there's an urban story of Gina Champion-Cain about how this woman came, took over this town, was a major socialite, raised huge amounts of money, and fell. So I just want to ask, how did the string start unwinding on her? Like, how did it collapse?
So it's a longer story than I can do for your podcast. But if you read the book, if you buy the book on Amazon, I did it. What you'll find is there is a whistleblower. So Ponzi schemes don't end. They either end because you can't raise any more money to pay off the other people. That was not her problem. She had there was no shortage of investors. But there was one investor or a friend of an investor who did a little homework and became the whistleblower. So how it ends, it was an email, it was a letter, it was a something. It's always something small. And we'll see how it ends. She's an interesting character because she's charismatic and sexy and charming and relentless, and people were mesmerized. But there's very little forgiveness, and there probably shouldn't be. I mean, it was a scam. But I'll end with this. She says to me, while normally every Ponzi scheme just keeps going and going, I had an end game. She said, I was going to take my empire, my restaurants and my vacation rentals and my businesses and I'm going to bundle the whole thing up and take it public. And then if I can take it public, Gina Champion-Cain Enterprises, a public company, I can pay everybody back. Now, whether or not that's realistic, that's for another time. But she says, I had a plan. I was going to take it public. Now, I pointed out to her in our interviews that you're taking public something that was financed by other people's money who didn't know they were being an investor in a public company. And she actually got an investment banker to come and start the process of taking this whole empire public. So her response would be, I had an exit. I could see the way out. I just didn't have time to get there. Now, the truth is, eventually some investment banker has to understand that money was not her money. But I think the dream and the fantasy was enough to keep her going. And I sort of admire that she had an exit. She said, I can pay everybody back. The problem mostly in Ponzi schemes, there's no way to pay people back. But in this case, she had a plan. And ironically, because of certain involvements of Chicago Title, while her plan didn't come to pass, Chicago put up 140 million. They raised another 20 million from this. And there's clawbacks of another 20 million. The irony is the total loss was 183. That's what's called MIMO, money in, money out, 183. Yes. And they're going to get back about 179 to 180. It's unbelievable. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. And I think when she gets out, she's going to start a whole company to chase down other scammers. I mean, she's got a whole plan. She's going to get out and she's going to help other people who have been conned by people like her. I mean, how can you not love that?
Well, it's always great to have a redemption story. Is she planning to come back here, Neil?
Yeah, I like redemption. I believe in redemption. I love talking to you. You give me a chance. It's kind of fun. We've done this book and we'll see what comes of it. Maybe Netflix will give us a call. Yeah, I don't know yet. But for now, the book comes out September 13th. And thank you for giving me the time to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Neil. And I look forward to talking to you soon, and have a wonderful day.